there! My name is Tori and you are listening to The Unclassical Musician, the podcast empowering the new generation of classical musicians to take risks and live a fulfilling life. Each week, we dive in headfirst into a topic on the minds of young professional musicians and come out the other side with a new perspective on life as an artist. Hi, friends. Today on the show, I am so happy to present to you today a conversation with flutist Tyler Martin. He is a fellow Chicago to Houston transplant. Tyler and I knew of each other for a while, but connected on Instagram last year. You're probably tired of hearing me talk about meeting interesting people on Instagram, but I can't stop, won't stop. Tyler and I know each other because he transferred to DePaul the year after I finished at DePaul. And one of my roommates from my last year in Chicago, Mary Jamerson, who is also an excellent flutist, she was at the University of Missouri with Tyler before she came to DePaul for her artist diploma, and then Tyler transferred to DePaul from University of Missouri, Kansas City. So fast forward a few years, and Tyler ended up at Rice University the year after I moved to Houston, and we connected on Instagram over All-State Etudes, which is like such a Texas flute teacher thing to say, and I won't apologize for it. Anyways, Tyler is a fantastic flutist and all-around wonderful human being. He is definitely on that orchestral player track, but as you'll hear in our interview, the pandemic has kind of shifted some thinking for him. Besides doing his second master's at Rice, he is also a sub for the Houston Symphony, and he's played at Spoleto, Texas Music Festival, and Brevard. Last summer, Tyler was a featured performer for the National Flute Association Summer Series, their celebration series, which was the new online NFA convention in place of the in-person one that was supposed to be taking place in Dallas. Tyler also teaches flute around Houston and is a strong advocate for classical music education, especially in communities of color and giving back to the Black community. Before we dive into our conversation, I wanted to real quick remind you about Patreon. If you are enjoying the content that goes to your ears every week and you would like to contribute monetarily to the future of this podcast and be a part of the exclusive Patreon online community with lots of behind-the-scenes little goodies, I encourage you to head on over to patreon.com. That's patreon.com/theunclassicalmusician. There's 3 tiers. You can contribute from as little as $5 per month all the way up to $20 per month. And the higher you go, the more fun bonuses you get. If you haven't checked it out yet, I encourage you to do so. I would really appreciate a few minutes of your time and your consideration. And without further ado, here's Tyler Martin. Hi, Tyler.
Hey, friend. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Yeah?
Well. It's okay that I'm a little informal, right? No video, just audio?
Oh, yeah. No, don't worry about it.
Cool.
It's just us.
Okay, cool.
But you look super cool with your hat and your headphones on.
Thank you. How have you been?
I'm good. Can't really complain too much about last week in Texas. I know you said that you were pretty lucky.
I was super lucky, yeah.
Yeah, after this week, seeing some of my students again, very fortunate that I would say most of them did not have major water damage from pipes bursting, but there's a good handful who are not able to be at their homes right now, and it's
Oh
just
wow.
really hard.
Yikes. Yeah, fortunately, not unfortunately, fortunately, most of my students, were either away, so they didn't have to deal with what was going on last week, or they have been, just as blessed as I have and as I was, and are able to continue, for the most part, their normal, lives and schedules. But yeah, this energy crisis and all of the grid stuff that's going down in Texas is not the best right now. This
No.
is the first major ding that Houston has gotten on my list so far, right? Before I was like, oh my god, like Houston's great, like I really want to live here and stay here, and now I'm like, Houston's still great, but
Yeah. I mean, I do have to say though that earlier this week when it was like 72 degrees and sunny and just like low humidity and perfect, I was just like, oh,
right,
so
exactly.
like it didn't make up for last week. I was just like, oh my god, why couldn't it have been like this last
The
week?
contrast in Houston is really insane. Like, you have weeks like last week, and then you have those days, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is why I live in Texas.
Mm-hmm. I mean, granted, like in Chicago, like you can experience all four seasons in
Right,
one day,
right.
you know? And here we just like went from like 0 degrees to like 72 and perfect in like less than a week, which is crazy. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah, Mother Nature.
But anyways, so Tyler, please. Okay, you and I, we know each other from like also like both of us like being in and around Chicago, from Chicago, moved around a couple of times. Now
Correct.
we're both here in Houston, and I'm gonna like give people the spiel about that in the intro. But can you please tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and like what you've been up to for the past year that we've been in a pandemic?
Yeah, so obviously, I think you figured out by now that my name is Tyler. I'm a flutist, originally from Chicago, Illinois, and a recent Houston transplant. I am getting a second master's at Rice University, and completed my undergrad and first master's degree at DePaul University and the New England Conservatory of Music, respectively. Um, yeah, so just as a flutist, I am trying to go the orchestral route, but actually, this pandemic has sort of broadened my horizons on things that I, can do and am able to do, and I'm just excited to see where the future kind of takes me with that.
Yeah, for sure. And because when we had gone and gotten coffee and sat outside and we talked for like 2 hours, got pretty deep into how the landscape of the classical music world is going to be changing.
Yeah,
Um, so for you being at Rice, like for so many people, so many young musicians, like Rice Shepherd School of Music is like the shiny castle on the hill of orchestral training programs, right?
right.
So I know, like at the beginning of this school year, so many music students were having to figure out, like, is it going to be worth the tuition money to stay in school during a pandemic? Like, am I really going to be getting the kind of education that I want to be getting, that I'm paying so much money for? So can you kind of share with everyone like how Rice has adapted their program during the pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I should probably start with what Rice looked like before the pandemic. But before the pandemic, it was a super like bustling community of just really engaged and very friendly musicians, which I'm like very happy about personally. I made lots of friends. The orchestra is great. I love my teacher, Miss Spicy, and just really everybody there has been super supportive, and of my growth. And yeah, and then after the pandemic hit, for a while, things just sort of kind of hit a standstill, as I'm sure everyone experienced. But I'm actually really proud and fortunate of how Rice has sort of adapted to the changing climate of the situation. We get tested twice weekly, and that's a requirement of every student that is on campus at Shepherd. Um,
Oh, so you have to have the nose thing twice a week, every week?
Twice a week, every week.
Oh gosh.
Luckily, we get to like schedule it so it like works with my schedule, so I'm not like changing around my day too much. And honestly, at this point, it's become sort of just mundane. It's just a very, low key part of my day, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing,
Uh,
but
I just feel bad for all of your noses, you know?
yeah, and it's nice too because in addition to getting tested, we also have different options of how we would like to get tested. So we have self-administered tests, which I, am a huge fan of because personally I don't like other people sticking things up my nose. I don't know about you.
No, no, thank you.
And then there's the traditional test, obviously. And then we also have access to a saliva test, which is
Mm.
also really nice because, for like you were just saying, the people that are a little bit hesitant about sticking things up their nose have this alternative option, which is great.
We say this like, yeah, no one wants things stuck up their nose, like unless
Right.
you're like a toddler who accidentally like gets a Lego stuck up their nose or something, like no one wants to have these things stuck up their nose twice a week, every week.
Right. But, unfortunately, due to the situation, that's just the way things are. But
Yeah.
it kind of is not as bad as I was anticipating it being. I remember, getting that email at the beginning of the semester and being like, all right, this is going to be a thing. You're going to have to do this. And I was like dreading it because up until that point, I was just staying at home. I hadn't gotten an actual official COVID test.
Hmm.
So I was unsure of what to expect. But it's been pretty, like I said, mundane, to say the least.
And
Um,
safe also, if like literally every single student has to have it done twice a week. I can't imagine that y'all have had any like serious breakouts this whole time.
Right, exactly. And that leads into, more about Rice in the pandemic and like because of this rigorous sort of testing schedule, we're continuing with chamber music and recently we just started back playing an orchestra, which is
Oh wow.
crazy to me. It was a very um, weird experience. Lots of emotions, verge of tears, all of that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm, I bet.
But yeah, so most classes are virtual. There are in-person options that are distanced, of course, and then chamber music occurs um, 3 times a week for most students, and then orchestra on a sort of weird kind of schedule that is very convoluted and hard to describe, but
Mm.
it's happening.
At least it's happening. That's awesome.
Yes, yes, yes. I like went on Monday for the first time and was just almost on the verge of tears, like I was saying, just because it was such an overwhelming experience to be able to sit in an orchestra again, albeit very different than the orchestra that we're used to sitting in, but to be able to make music on a larger scale with my colleagues again like that was just almost overwhelming. I'll
Oh,
never take it for granted again,
I
honestly.
know. Yeah. Wow, that's so fantastic. So, like when you are meeting for orchestra or even like with chamber music groups, like, w- what kind of like do you have like special equipment that you're using for like everyone's safety? Like, do you wear like a flute mask or like do you have like plexiglass shields or something?
Yeah, so we have the shields, and but for the most part, Rice has really, really done a good job of upping the ventilation in all of the rehearsal spaces, practice rooms, concert halls, venues, etc. Which is really the most effective way of
Mm-hmm.
sort of combating this COVID-19 pandemic, right? Like the plexiglass shields are great, but as we know, the virus is airborne. So, like, how much does it actually do? But we do
Right.
still use we do still use the shields in like my quintet, for example, We have plexiglass shields between us. And in orchestra, this might be changing, but at least on Monday when I was there, I was in essentially a hockey like box, like off to the side, not where the flute is traditionally seated at all. It was very jarring. To I kind of feel for my horn friends out there, having to play, ahead of
Oh,
the
really?
stick. Yeah,
Wow.
was very disorienting. um, but yeah, we all have to adapt to these new sort of experiences, and I'm willing to take it on if it means I get to play with my friends again.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And like you said, it's got to be a real challenge to your musicianship in some ways because I can't imagine that you can really hear very well like the like if you're that far away from everyone else and if you're in your own little plexiglass box,
Yeah.
like I can imagine it's really difficult to hear what's going on around you.
After rehearsal, I was talking with two of my friends, and I was like, it's fine. This is going to be just an exercise in trust. So it's a
Mhm.
lot of looking, it's a lot of, over exaggerated cueing, it's a lot of just, trying to heighten all of the other senses since we're not able to use our ears because we're so far away as much, or rely on our ears, I should say, as much. So,
Yeah, that's really interesting. I feel kind of sort of the same way about teaching flute lessons online, or I don't know how you feel about it, teaching flute lessons online or even receiving flute lessons online. Like,
hmm
since the audio quality isn't very good in most cases, like you really have to like rely on like visually, okay, how are the kids lined up, and like what are their lips doing, have them come close to the camera, whereas like if you were in person, you know, like it's so much easier to give oral cues or to be able to
right.
play back at them.
Yeah, I totally, totally, totally agree. Like, it's definitely been a challenge teaching lessons online. And, like, I don't know, I feel like there's this, a little bit of a disconnect that happens, when you're on screen. Even for this interview right now, like, it would be nice to be able to see you and, pick
Yeah.
up on your body language and, in person. And I think the same thing applies to flute lessons for sure. But on the other hand, the flip side, like there are many different things that we maybe wouldn't have necessarily focused on or been able to um, do in person now that we're doing over Zoom, or things that like maybe weren't quite as apparent in person that have become quite apparent over Zoom. Posture being one of the huge things with my students that I've been trying to correct. But yeah,
I would say for me, a huge shift. I mean, like kids are always very, they like to neglect their metronome practice, like no one likes to practice with the metronome when they're that age. But
right.
like when you're online and then there's a lag, in order to tell if they're actually playing in time, like you have to have them play with a
Play with the
metronome.
metronome. Yep.
So I hope that these kids appreciate that their rhythm is going to be so much better after taking online lessons for like a year. Jeez.
Yes. Yes.
Ugh.
Yes.
I know they hate it, but
Yeah. I actually, a lot of my students, I think, have very astutely and keenly adjusted to Zoom lessons.
hmm.
One in particular actually has asked for longer lessons, and she's just really enjoying herself, which like brings joy to my heart
Yeah.
as a teacher, because I'm just like, oh, okay, something that I'm doing is right, and my students are like having fun, and they're growing and they're enjoying the process. And I was a little bit worried about how that was gonna translate to a virtual sort of format, but so far so good.
That's good. That's awesome to hear. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I struggle with the same thing. I mean, maybe not so much like imposter syndrome levels, but it's just like constantly having to like revisit how am I going to make these online lessons just like to spice
Worth
it
it.
up a little bit,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
But I do think that it has done so much for like the future of the music industry, the classical music industry, and just in terms of like normalizing online lessons.
Yeah.
Cause like I don't know about you, but I didn't have a lesson on Skype until I think maybe like senior year of undergrad. And it was with Jim Walker because
Yeah.
I didn't want to fly all the way out to LA to have one lesson. And like that was it. And so we had a Skype lesson and it was weird.
Yeah, before this pandemic, I had never done any sort of Skype or Zoom lesson, never taught, never been taught, so this was a huge, huge learning curve for me. And yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely been more normalized. And I think in the future, like technology just in general during this pandemic, I think has been a welcome, sort of wave in the music community that I think is here to stay. And I hope it's here to stay.
Oh, for sure. I feel like it needed it. It needed a facelift.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Some Botox, you know.
Just a little something to just like zhuzh it up a little bit. It needed a little help.
Right, right, right.
So talking a little bit about like the future of like the music industry, like in general, what do you think like how do you think orchestras specifically are going to be different in the future because of the pandemic?
This might be the pessimistic side of me coming out, but I don't honestly think um, the orchestra, I'm hoping that it will change, but I haven't really seen or heard of any super tangible, long lasting changes that will be made to orchestra in the future. If anything, all of my orchestral musician friends are the most eager to get back to the way that things were. That being said, outside of orchestra, I can see lots of changes that will occur within the classical music industry, energy industry. Specifically, like willingness to collaborate with people that aren't necessarily in your space, right? Like
Mm.
I've done duets with friends of mine that live in other parts of the country, and I've had master classes with teachers that live all over. So I think just the spirit of like collaboration, the spirit of embracing technology and using it to our benefit will continue and is what's new. And people are thinking about new things every day. I think even for me, like this pandemic has been a time to really think about what I want to change about my career trajectory and what I actually want to be doing. And like I think a lot of people are in the same sort of boat as me and thinking in terms of what could change when things get back to some semblance of normal very soon, we hope.
Yeah. So do you think that compared to when you started at Rice, because this is your third year, right?
This is my second.
This is your second year. Okay. So
Yes.
compared to when you started your first year, I assume you were probably like full on like the orchestra track, like this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
So how do you feel like I'm sure that's something that you obviously still want to do, but what do you see for yourself now as a result of this?
Yeah. So obviously, like you just said, the orchestra thing is still a huge, huge dream of mine that I'm, going at full force. Um, Outside of that, though, like what I've noticed that I gravitated to most was actually teaching, which is what we were just talking about,
Mm-hmm.
and really being creative about how to, teach the flute, teach the fundamentals, teach the things that, I feel are important as a player to know, but also like how to make it fun, connecting with my students more, spending more time with them, talking about things that they like to do, like outside of flute, and figuring out how to incorporate that into their lessons. But also, one of my like learned COVID skills has been video editing and audio engineering. So I'm hoping to one day, very very soon, keep stay posted for for the release of this. But hopefully one day, very very soon, I'll start a AV engineering business where I can sort of be like a one-stop shop for all of my musician friends to, from their recording needs to do videography and sound work all the way to the like mastering at the end and CDs and whatever else they might need.
Wow, that would be so cool.
Yeah, it's interesting because the pandemic has like in some ways very much broadened my view of what I'm capable of and what I can do and what I'm actually qualified to do. I think
Mm.
a lot of the time as musicians, like we get in this rut of thinking where we're like, we went to school to study music. Music is the only thing I know, so music is the only thing that I can do. And
Hmm.
I am discovering that that is not true. I am a multifaceted individual with lots of interests, and I can do lots of stuff, and I shouldn't be limiting myself. And I hope some of the listeners are in agreement with me because I think that's very common among classical musicians.
Oh, yes, for sure. Yeah, I totally agree. I think if there's anything that's this pandemic has taught us, it's that you have to be able to do more than one thing. And
Right.
just because you have a degree in this thing doesn't mean that you're also not good at these other things that are tangentially related to that thing,
Exactly.
you know?
Exactly.
And I was actually just thinking about it the other day because, planning a wedding, we booked
Right.
a
Congratulations.
thanks. So we booked a videographer, and videography is can be very expensive.
Yeah.
And I'm just watching all of these wedding videos, and they're so high quality. And in order for a musician to be able to make a music video of that quality, because I do think that like video is like the thing that we should be focusing on right now,
Right.
like it is prohibitively expensive to hire a professional videographer for a few hours,
Yeah.
like if to make one music video that like you may or may not make money off of because you're just going to put it on YouTube unless you like try to monetize it elsewhere. So I think that that is an awesome thing to be like investing yourself in right now.
Yeah, and it's also a sort of way to allow my creativity to express itself outside of like a musical means, for example, because, videography is so much more than just like pointing your camera at, somebody and saying, all right, here we go. I hope for the best, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's lots of planning and like storytelling that's involved. And like, especially that last part, the storytelling is what I'm most interested in because it just sort of allows me to live in that creative space. And after, years and years and years and years and years in classical music, um, I sort of have found myself almost one track minding it, and like having this other realm to sort of free up that creative energy has also helped my flute playing, actually, which is
Mm.
surprising.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't like, I guess it is surprising if you've never experienced something like that before, but it's like you're like cross wiring your brain, like you're still
Right.
using that creativity muscle. It's just you're using it in the way that is not the thing that you've been doing for 15 years or however long you've been
Right.
playing for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow, that is so cool. I didn't know that about you. That's awesome.
Yeah. New development, and it's in the works. I'm excited about the direction that it's going, and yeah, we'll see.
So,
Stay posted. Stay tuned.
yeah, that's so you would say that like your like videography and like audio editing like that kind of stuff has been something that's been helping to like keep you motivated when there's like no auditions going on?
I would that, and I've been, I think, doing what a lot of other musicians have been doing, which has been entering a bunch of online competitions
Mm.
and just I'm very much the sort of person that needs constant, just like stimulation and working toward a goal to feel fulfilled, to feel um, sort of not stagnant. So a combination of a bunch of things. I've also been like trying to cook a little bit more.
Mm.
I made a stuffed salmon and potatoes and asparagus dinner the other night that was
Mm.
delicious, if I do say so myself.
Sounds good.
But yeah, combinations of practicing and video editing, audio engineering, and cooking and going outside has all sort of contributed to what I've been doing outside of it during the pandemic.
Nice. That sounds like it sounds like a very well-rounded way to be spending your time.
Yeah, it's a very peaceful, quiet life. um, but yeah, it's fulfilling and it's doing the job. It's really nice actually to sort of take a break from the stress. Even though, now that school is in full swing, somehow, this is crazy to me. I was just talking to somebody the other day about this, but somehow pandemic school is just as stressful, if not more stressful, than
Mm,
in-person school.
man.
But 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 it's so worth it, I think. It's teaching me a lot, not just in terms of, play the right note here. Make sure this note is a little flat or a little sharp. Make sure you know the history behind the piece, but more so like, all right, like how are you going to, deal with life as a professional musician, especially when there aren't tons and tons of opportunities like there were before? How are you going to survive? And, this time has really taught me that that's something that I can do. I can survive even in the midst of a pandemic. So I know once this is over, that sort of has taken away some anxiety that I've had about, what life would be like after graduation.
Great. I love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's got to be such a confidence boost that like if you can figure out a way to make it work during a pandemic, then being on your own after school is not going to be anything that you haven't already done.
Right, exactly.
That's awesome. So, okay. So this is your second year at Rice.
Correct.
Okay, got it. No, I was just thinking timeline stuff in my head. So I want to kind of throw it back a little bit because last summer you were a featured artist for the National Flute Association, which
Yeah.
like the non-flutists listening probably don't understand, but like that's like a really big deal. I feel like if the NFA wants to feature you and like talk to you, then that means that like you're definitely doing something right. So
Thank you.
yeah, for sure.
I'd like to think.
Yes, I think so. So can you like tell the people a little bit? I'm sure flutists are interested in kind of like how that worked, like how they approached you and like what you programmed and how did you feel about the whole experience?
Yeah, so it all started with an email from Jennifer Grimm, who was the coordinator for the convention this past year. And basically, she just reached out to me and asked if I had any works that I'd like to present to be featured on this celebration series, which was super, super, out of the blue, unexpected, very like surreal almost in a way. And I was just like, you know what? Like, I'll do it. Absolutely. I programmed Prelude by Ulysses K and Nocturne by Lily Boulanger. Um, and the programming was very specific because during that time was sort of around the George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, when it kind of hit that like peak. So I definitely wanted to make sure that I was playing a piece by an African American composer, the Prelude, and also by a woman composer.
Mm.
So and both of those pieces are very dear to my heart. I actually played that nocturne on my graduation recital from New England Conservatory, um, and the K is a newfound love, a new piece that's a fave of mine that I had been just working on becoming familiar with, and it ended up being a lot more emotional to perform than I anticipated because I was really just thinking about like everything that was going on at the time and trying to channel that into my music making. Um, and then after the performance, or sorry, before the performance, after I got the email from Jennifer Graham, I also got another email asking me if I'd like to do an interview, which you know a little bit of is kind of anxiety inducing for me. Interviews are like the scariest thing in the world, but I was like, you know what, I have a voice and I should use it, and clearly like they're interested in what I have to say if they're emailing me and asking me to do this interview. So I just went along with it, and it ended up being a lot less painless than I thought.
A lot less painful.
Painful than I thought.
I hope that this interview has not given you anxiety, because I try to make it like pretty low key, like we're just chatting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think interviews just as a whole definitely like bring a little bit of anxiety, but it's definitely like a different experience this interview than the NFA interview, because like we're friends, you know. I'm just like talking to my friend.
And whereas the NFA is like the NFA.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. But it was a great interview. I read it over a few times, you know.
Oh,
And
thank
actually,
you.
I wanted to ask before I move away from this, are your performances from the summer series available for people to watch or listen to online anywhere now?
They are. So, I don't think the Nocturne is up yet, but it will be shortly. But you can, you know, subscribe to my YouTube channel, follow me, Flutist Tyler, and there are the prelude is on there, as well as tons of other just, you know, flute content of me playing the flute, if that's what you want to listen to.
Yeah, great. Okay, I'll put a link in the show notes for anyone who wants to watch and listen and learn a
Perfect.
little bit more about those composers that you chose to feature. So you, in your bio that you have on your website, you talk about being an advocate for music education and classical music, especially in terms of like giving back to the Black community.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you a little bit about like what your experience with that has been like in Houston, because
Hmm.
in your bio you talk a little bit about what you're doing in NEC about it and stuff like that. But I was just wondering what your experience has been like in Houston.
Yeah, so far, not so much in Houston. I've just been sort of, you know, dealing with like we've been I guess the theme of this podcast, the pandemic. You know, there's not a lot that I feel like I can do right now at this moment. um, but I did recently start working with another organization in Boston, actually virtually mentoring um, BIPOC musicians that are on this music track, um, which consists of weekly, you know, check-ins with my mentees and
Oh.
making sure that they're just like staying on track for their goals and what they want to achieve. So
And it's so cool that you're able to do that virtually from Houston, because that wouldn't have been a thing that you could do
exactly,
before.
yeah, before. So you know, it's been really fulfilling. We got to do some online trainings, meet some great people, listen to some talks, do some reading. And it's also just really nice to have a sort of like tangible, hands-on sort of effect in somebody's life, especially somebody that looks like me, that is trying to do what I do, you know, which is
Hmm.
crazy to me because like I always think of myself as that person that's like looking up, and it's crazy to me to sort of have this like paradigm shift in my head where I'm like, you know, like you are doing the thing, and there are people that will gain value from things that you have to say in your experiences, which, you know, in some ways I've been like, wow, like, wow. But in some ways I've also been like, but I still have so much to learn.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I feel like that's the best way to feel about it, you know? Like
Yeah,
always learning, but also with the understanding that you have influence over other people for good, for lots of
yeah,
good. Yeah.
yeah.
So, from let's just like rewind to February of last year
Okay.
when the coronavirus was like just starting to be like very serious. before the killing of George Floyd and the huge Black Lives Matter protests all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, being an advocate for classical music, especially for young Black kids, is something that you feel very strongly about and have felt very strongly about. But I'm just curious if your personal beliefs and feelings and um, philosophy around that music advocacy has changed at all from this time last year, before all of that, to now.
You know, I was thinking about this, and I don't think my mindset or my mentality surrounding advocacy has changed. Um, if anything, I think it just has become more important to me. Um, and it's just become more apparent, that even outside of advocacy, there's just a lot of work that needs to be done by all of us, just as humans, as
Mm-hmm.
people, you know? Um, and that's just been something that's been sort of, I've been taken aback because, I really did think that we were in a better place than we are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was sort of world turning, like literally my world was turned upside down when I realized, how bad it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that there's been some positive that has come out of it, right? Like people are certainly more aware now. People are certainly doing their best to educate themselves, and I've been fortunate within my circle to be around people that are actually trying to make tangible change um, within and without the music community,
Mm-hmm.
um, which has been encouraging and very just. I've been grateful to see it, that the people that I surround myself with are really really good people. I really don't take that for granted at all now, especially, and it's been super heartwarming and uplifting, to say the least.
That's good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
I know for me, kind of like as a mindset shift, it was like before last summer, I don't think I ever really fully realized that as someone who is no longer in school, I have full control over the music that I choose to play,
Yeah.
because we have been trained for so long to play like the major pieces in the repertoire. And I mean that's like systemically a thing that like is going to have to change at some point in the way that conservatory training
Or maybe
happens.
not change, but just, be added to,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree. But
So like it never even occurred to me that I could take the time to learn music by living composers who are not white men, you know? Because, like, I'm on my time now,
yeah,
right? And so it's just like, why have I not been doing it this whole time? Like, I haven't been in school for like 4 years and I just hadn't done it, you know?
and I agree with you. I think there's just sort of a lack on or lack and a honestly a disservice on to us as musicians, music students, people that have graduated from music school, on the part of these universities and conservatories. Like, I think that this repertoire, and I think now it actually is. Um, I see different websites and Google Docs floating around, um, highlighting BIPOC composers and women composers, but I really do think that for a while there, that aspect of classical music, those contributions, that beautiful music that we now have that we didn't necessarily know about or have access to before is now becoming important.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I don't know about you, but in terms of like orchestras and how orchestras may or may not look different like a year from now or a year and a half from now, I think that all of the ones that have been doing like online programming or like small chamber music concert series in place of in person full orchestra performances, I hope that that sticks because I think that it brings more people into the fold in that way. I don't know if they should be charging as much as they are charging for those online concerts, but that's
Yes.
another thing entirely.
Yeah.
But I hope that like just having even that outlet of like not programming like Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms, um,
Right.
helps introduce more people to more music that they hadn't been made aware of
Yeah.
before, you know?
Yeah, and I might, amend my earlier statement. I think orchestras will change too, in that they will, now offer a wider variety of composers and pieces that they're playing, and hopefully we'll see more black and brown faces in orchestras as well, as a result of this. But we'll see.
Yeah. We're very lucky that the Houston Symphony, I think by and large, like does a pretty good job, you know? I mean, there's always room for improvement, but I think it's a really good organization and I guess we can just only hope that other major orchestras feel the need to evolve in that direction.
Yes. I mean, I think it's more than a need, it's a must, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Like, I don't know if things stay the same, that model, that old model, will be successful. I think we need to continue to push boundaries and move more into the 21st century, for that to happen.
Yes. And like I really do believe it's us. It's our generation right now that is going to it sounds cheesy and it sounds cliche, but like we are going to shape the future of what the music industry is going to
Agreed.
be like. So like
Agreed.
that's like a pretty cool feeling to have. Like we have a lot of power over what it's going to be like in the future because we're going to be the people that have the jobs, you know?
Right. Yeah. It's a great feeling. It's a cool, sort of mindset to be in. There's also a little bit of a burden, because I'm
Yeah.
like, oh man, I really need to like think about like how I can change, how I can convince my colleagues to change, how I can, move this forward, move this wheel forward, because I really do think that that old system is dying, and I think we should let it die and and build something new.
For sure. And I want to be respectful of your time today. So I feel like that is a great stopping point. I'm just going to leave it at that for right now. I hope everyone feels inspired by that statement. Um, so if so we talked a little bit about your like video and audio editing stuff that you are going to have coming out in the future. Do you have any other projects that you have going on right now that you want to share with the people listening?
I do, but I kind of want to leave you guys on a little bit of a cliffhanger. I'll
Ooh.
just say, follow me at Flutist Tyler on Instagram and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you'll get some new and exciting developments.
Ooh, I love a good cliffhanger. Great. Well, thank you so much, Tyler. I really appreciate you being generous with your time today. I know you're still in school and you have a lot of stuff going on right
Oh,
now, but
absolutely.
I really hope that everyone listening got a lot of good little gold nuggets out of our conversation today.
Yeah, I hope so too. And it was nice to, see you again and get to talk to you sort of face to face.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Of course, it was my pleasure. And we should definitely go get coffee and sit outside again sometime soon.
Let's do it. I'm
Okay.
down.
Thank you, Tyler. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Bye.
Bye. I hope that you guys had as much fun listening to that conversation as I had talking to Tyler. He's such a great guy, such a joy to talk to. Got a little serious there, but all good things, all major things that I think everyone needs to be thinking about nowadays. And of course, I'm going to put links in the show notes for Tyler's interview with the NFA. So if you'd like to read through that and hear a little bit more about his background and what he's been doing for music advocacy, that's going to be in that interview. I'm also going to link his website, his Instagram, and his YouTube channel. I would definitely stay posted on that YouTube channel because it sounds like there's going to be like some cool video content coming out. I'm really excited for that. If you enjoyed our conversation today, please make sure that you do the thing. You got to rate, review, and subscribe. And if you care to share this episode with a friend, I would super appreciate it. I wanted to share with you something that we're going to do a little bit differently coming up in March. The March 9th episode of The Unclassical Musician, which is going to be next week's episode, if you're listening to this on Tuesday, March 2nd. Next week, we're doing a Q&A/AMA episode. So I know that's a lot of letters. So that's like question and answer, and then ask me anything. Nothing is off limits. If you have a couple questions for me that you would like to hear answered on the air and get a little shout out, I would be happy to answer your questions. So there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can submit questions to me. Probably the easiest would be to just email me, Tori@ToriLupinek.com, or you can DM me on Instagram @ToriLupinekFlutist. I'm going to put a link for the topic request form from my website in the show notes as well. You can do that. If you haven't joined the Unclassical Musicians Facebook group, there's a post going on there for questions as well. You can go ahead and join the group and post your question there. Some of the questions I've received already are kind of like really big questions that I'm planning on doing entire individual episodes dedicated to in the future. So if you have submitted a question already and you don't hear it on the show next week, just stay tuned because you're going to have it answered in the future on an entire episode. So stay tuned for that next week, Q&A/AMA episode. I'm excited about it. Real quick, one more reminder to go and join Patreon. Link in the show notes also. And for everyone listening in and around Texas and people who experienced severe damage to their homes as a result of the ice storm that blew through last week, man, it's really devastating, the amount of damage done to the homes of some of my students, and band directors as well, and the people that I play with at church. I am so sorry. My thoughts really, really going out to y'all. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this one for today. I hope you really enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you'll be back next week for some more on the Unclassical Musician. And now here comes the happy ukulele music.